Today's daf is daf Daled. The Kitzer, we had the Mishnah that went through four different dinim, and we're going to focus on two of them. One is regarding Shavuos. That Shavuos, the principle of Avera, that if you make a Shavuos and you don't abide by it, is in the future tense. Lahara or lahativ, where you either self-denial, which is lahara, or to do something for yourself, which is lahativ. And then we add another two, which is past tense, achalti v'lo yachalti. That you also get lashes, you get or you bring a carbon oil of the yared. So we're talking about carbon oil of the yared, which is a carbon commensurate to how wealthy you are, also about the past. So that's about Shavuos. Louder.
Is that an assay? You must distance yourself from Pascal, or is it a nice assay? Don't be involved.
Do you know the Pella? That Midvashek Tirchak
at all.
Doesn't really mean that you're not allowed to lie. There's a Mishnah Masechta Kala. It's actually not to see it there. The Mishnah of the Kala talks about the Machlekes B'Sham Beisil Ketzim Raknif Kala you have a no and Beisil and so Beishamai it says you got to say the way it is Kala Kamoshihi and Beisil says Kala no whatever it is. And our Gemara in Shavuos Daf Yudzayin, the discussion is only one line. He said, if a person buys an object, you tell him it looks ugly, you tell him it looks nice, which is very hard to understand. So what's the answer? So that's also a problem. You're lying there. How is it anybody? So you look in the Mishnah of Sechta Kala, I think page base. There the Mishnah goes on for many more lines, and Beshame throws at him. It says, what are you doing? So nobody still answers. If you look where the pasuk with Vasheka Tirchak is written, it's talking about in a bezdin. In a bezdin, it says with Vasheka Tirchak, but not in Algemein. That's not the Easter. And then we had more of in Hazov and the Test. You know, it's only if you knew Bishas Meiser about the future, whatever. It's not what you think it is. But anyhow, a mikri doesn't mean you're allowed to lie. You're not allowed to lie. Because the famous question is, what's all the din of Shavuos and the Dorim? It says very Mizashak Tirchak. End of story. So what's the idea of Shavuos? What's the idea of a neder? If I said I'll do something, I got to do it because Mizashak Tirchak. What I need a Shavuos for? What does that add? So Chassidus already explains besides the Etzem Nefesh and all that. But in Parshat Pshat, what is it? It's not the same thing. Okay, so back to the bottom of the page. So then the Gemara wants to know who's the author of our Mishnah, because Rabbi Shmuel is the one who holds up by Tumah. And by Tumah 2x4 is 2 that you forgot that you're tummy and you walked to the base of Mikdash. You forgot your tummy, you ate Kodesh, and the additional 2 is you knew you were tummy, but you forgot that this was Kodesh. You forgot that this was base of Mikdash. So we want to know who it is, because according to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva holds when it comes to Tumah, it's only if you forgot that you were tummy, but if you forgot that it's Kodesh, it doesn't work. So Misha can't be Rabbi Akiva, must be Rabbi Shmuel, who holds that Helam Kodesh and Helam Mikdash is also. But then we have a problem with Shavuos, because Rabbi Shmuel holds that Shavuos is only if it's Lahara Al-Hativ future tense, and the additional 2 is even if it's not Lahara Al-Hativ, but Ezrak, V'lo Ezrak, I'll throw, I won't throw, it doesn't personally impact me, it's also included. But past tense, it doesn't work. So who's the author of our Mishnah? So we conclude, without going to the whole Arich, which we learned just in Gemara, the Gemara concludes that it's Rebbe. Over here, he held like this Tana, and over here, he held like this Tana. Okay, so now we're up to the bottom of the page, and we're saying, what do you mean? How do you know he holds like these 2 tonight? Ella, 4 lines to the bottom. Rebbe the time made the nafshim if not that Rebbe just bringing different Tanoim and letting you know that this guy, we're trying to get case of 2x4, and therefore we learn that Kiva Rebbe Shmuel. No. He's saying over here that Rebbe time made the nafshim kamar. Rebbe himself, when Abdallah over all the very bottom of the page, that Rebbe himself is giving his own opinion. His own opinion. What do you call it? The Tanya we learn. How do you know that Rebbe holds that not only he holds like Rabbi Shmuel that the Helam that you forgot about Tummy is not just that you forgot that you were Tummy, but even if you forgot that the Mikdash was Tummy or that the Kodesh is Tummy, you also bring a carbon oil of the Yerid, not like Rabbi Akiva. He actually rules like Rabbi Shmuel. How do you know that Rabbi Taka Paskas that way? He's not just, quoting other rabbis, because it says the following in the Brais. How do you know Shein Chayiv Elal Yesh yourself? How do you know that you have to have a idea in the beginning? Maybe you didn't know you were tummy, you ate Kodesh, and then you found out you were tummy. Bring a carbon oil, you ate it. We say no. That's where all the other kabbanas come, Yom Kippur, and all these other kabbanas, the Yom Tovim and Chodesh do their thing. How do you need a idea in the beginning to make a chayv carbon? I'll tell you how I know, because in the pasuk it says twice the word venelam. It says in the pasuk if you touch something tame, and then it says venelam mimeno, you didn't know who tame. Okay, so that's the first half of the pasuk. It says venelam, you forgot, or you say you weren't aware, and you were tame, and vasham, and you were guilty. Then the pasuk continues, or if you touched a person, a corpse, if you touched the tomb of a person, right? Then it says again, venelam mimeno, you forgot, but who yada, but you once knew, or who yada you know, vasham, you're guilty. It says twice venelam. So Rabbi Kiva says, it says the first time you need Venelim to tell you that we're talking about, you forgot that you were tummy. So we know we're talking about a case. So the first Venelim is not extra. You need to tell Venelim that you touched something, you became tummy, you forgot Venelim. So we're talking about a case where you were the one who was tummy, not where the carbon was tummy. You were the one who was tummy. What's the second Nelim come and tell you? The second Nelim is coming to tell you. It says Venelim, but who yada. Now, what do you mean who yada he knew? If who yada l'chayda is if to tell you he knew afterwards, of course. Otherwise, what kind of carbon are you going to bring if you didn't know? Must be you knew beforehand, and it's extra. So we take the word who yada and we put it. We remove it in the pasuk. We shift it around the pasuk. Like we had a few days ago. We had a short while ago where we thanked Reb Shimon. Anybody who gave a birth to a child like Reb Shimon, because he knows how to be Masaris, knows how to move the words around the pasuk. We moved the words around the pasuk. The yada he knew, and he forgot. So therefore, Rabbi Kiva says it's only limited. The first Vanel will tell you it's only limited to the person if he was telling me he forgot when you bring a carbon oil yared. And the second Vanel Bahuyada, we take the word Bahuyada, we move it beforehand. There had to be a Yediyah first before you forgot. And then obviously you knew afterwards. The Pasuk is going to tell you otherwise what kind of carbon we're talking about here. That's the David Rabbi Kiva. Rebbe disagrees. He says Einu Tzarech. We don't need it. It says Venelim. So this is a Rebbe. This is how Rashi learns. He says, wow, he has so many questions on Rashi, but we'll just learn Rashi learns. He says here, Venelim. Venelim means the very fact it says Venelim you forgot means you once knew. So I don't need to move the pasuk around. The word Venelim itself means, and you forgot. What did you forget? If you didn't know, you didn't forgot. You just didn't know. It's a different word altogether. So therefore, or a different tense for the word vanilla, as we'll see more later. So vanilla means that you forgot, means you already knew. So I don't need to move vahula yada around. So what's the extra word vanilla and vahula yada? To tell you, the first vanilla was talking about that you were tummy and you forgot you were tummy. The second vanilla was talking about you were tummy, you remember you were tummy, but you forgot that this is the base of Mikdash. You forgot that this is Kodesh. So Rebbe therefore learns clearly, like Rabbi Shmuel, that Helim Kodesh and Helim Mikdash also warrants a carbon oil. That's how we know Rebbe Paschal is like Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, that only explains to us how we know he passes Bishmol. How do you know when it comes to the Dorim, he passes like Shavuos, he passes Rabbi Kiva also about the past tense. We'll see in a minute. To tell you that not only are you chayiv if you forgot you were tummy, you're also chayiv if you knew you were tummy, but you forgot that this is kodesh or this is mikdash. Okay, Ashkan be ideas these time in the nafshi. So clear Rebbe Paskas when it comes to Tumah, he Paskas I Rabbi Shmuel. Aber Shavuos the Isle time of the nafshi minolan. What about Shavuos? You're telling me that when it comes to Shavuos, he Paskas like Rabbi Akiva, not like Rabbi Shmuel, that it's also regarding the past tense. If you swore a chalti and it turned out to be you didn't, or loy a chalti, it turned out you did, you'll bring a carbon oil of the. How do you know that? So what is svaru? It's a svara. We'll soon see what the svara is. Skip this grind. Rabbi Kiva, my time become a chayv. I'll tell you how I know. Rabbi Kiva, why tak is him chayv shraga? The Torah says lahara lehetiv. Klar. It's future tense. If you swore you're about to be lahara lehetiv, future tense, and then you breached it, you bring a carbon of the. So you decided that if you made a shvua, I ate or I didn't eat, the same thing happens. It's going to be a lot. How do you know? So just bekitzer. We already had this a few times in Maruba, along Rashi. We had a few places. The different ways of understanding is it. How do you learn? Klal or prata klal, or ribu yamir ribu. And the long Rashi beautifully explains. This Rashi is like a teacher teaching a student how to learn the Gemara. Beautiful Rashi. You should learn when you have time. So the tchilgal follows. When you have a ribu means a word that's generic, inclusive, includes everything. There's nothing standing out. Everything. Then you have a word that is coming to limit. That word that's coming to limit, what's it doing? So Rashi says there's two ways of learning. Either it's mefaret or it's being memayit. What's the difference? Mefaret means it's coming to explain. Rashi says what mefaret means to explain. What did I mean when I said this klal? I didn't mean what you think I meant, everything. I meant only this prat. So you're explaining the klal. You turn the whole klal around. So that's called a klal befrat. Ein bechlal ela masha befrat. When you have a klal in the prat, the klal is reduced straight away to just the prat, nothing else. And then if you have another klal afterwards, we're trying now to expand. But if you're expanding once again to everything, so what was there a prat for in the beginning? You need another klal, two klalim. The second klal is coming to say, don't limit it only to the prat. It has to be similar to the prat. As a Susan Gemara gives you an example, has to be similar to the prat. Riboy means very different. Riboy, if you look at the same words, but we'll use a different methodology. Rabbi Shmuel is one who says klal prat klal. If we use a different methodology, we use riboy miyat. What does it mean? Riboy includes everything. They have a miyat, not prat, but a miyat. What does a miyat do? It's coming to reduce. It's not explaining the klal. It's coming to contradict the klal. It's coming to reduce the klal. The klal says everything. No, not everything. No, boss. Anything which is similar to this miyat. In other words, a riboy miyat is exactly the same outcome as a klal prat klal. Now you have a second riboy. So what's the second riboy going to tell you? Everything, but the most extraneous, the most contradictory, the most opposite thing to this prat. The only thing we're excluding is something which is so remote and so I guess opposite to whatever we're trying to say. Now, let's learn over here this pasuk here. When it comes, now we'll understand the machlekes b'shmol akiva when it comes to shvua. Why, if we include the past or not, we can include two things. We include two things. One thing we can include, okay, you have future tense. There's two limitations there. Lahara lahativ is future, and also it's only things that impact me directly. Denial, hara, or to give myself something which is lahativ. Two miyutim. Then, if I want to be marba, there's two stages of riba. The first stage of riba is still talk about the future because the Torah clearly says lahara lahativ, but instead of limiting it to lahara lahativ, let's expand it even things which I'm not harming myself. I'm not denying. Ezrik, lo ezrik. I'm throwing a rock. I'm not throwing a rock. But to go backwards, you can't do that. That's too much. That's too much opposite of what is it. That's if you use the methodology of klal or prat or klal. We're going to be marba anything similar to the prat, future tense. But what to be marba, even if it's not lahara lahativ. But if you can use the methodology of ribu and meat and ribu, we expand to everything, including the past. Not only the future, if you're not lahara lahativ, but even the past. So what are you being mayit? If nishba lavatlas hamitzvahs, if you're making a shul to mavatla mitzvahs, everything here at kolapachas is rishus. These are things you're allowed to do, and I decided to make it asa for me or mitzvah. But if it's already mujba mahar sinai, that is the only thing that a shul is not good. That's if you use the methodology of media means. Okay, so and then if we can prove that the Rebbe learns the method of ribuy, the ribuy, then he passes like Rabbi Akiva, and that's how we know that he passes also when it comes to shul as you go past. Says the Gemara. Okay, so that was the introduction. Send the next Amid Gemara. Said the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva, my time of Mechai Shava. Why talk Rabbi Akiva Mechai past tense? The dot is because he uses the methodology of ribuy, the ribuy. Rebbe nami doshir mit, and I know that Rebbe also follows the methodology. What's going on? The time when the Braisa Rebbe says, first of all, how do you know Rebbe holds Yidarshan ribuy mit? Remember, whenever you darshan ribuy mit, you're excluding less things than if you use the method of klal or prat or klal. Because klal or prat or klal means anything which is similar to the prat. That's very limiting. Ribuy mit, means everything is included in the ribuy, just one thing or whatever, something really. So, where do you see that? Let's say, when it comes to pidyon ben, what can you use to give to the kohen to redeem your firstborn? Rebbe says, use anything. You can redeem your b'chai with anything. But the only thing you can't do is min hashtarus. You cannot use a star, a check, because it is not intrinsically valuable. It has no value, zero. It represents value, but it itself has no value. And what the Torah says, you got to give chamisha shkolim, we'll soon see, and shkolim has value. Okay, silver. But Rabbanon say, much more limiting. No avodim, you can't use to give him a slave to the kohen. Shtaresh, nor give you the contract, like you say, no kakais. Kakais, the problem about kakais is it's not mobile. It's not metaltlin. But that's also different than the Chameshes Kolam, as we'll soon see. Money can move, it's transportable. Karka is not. And Avodim Huksul Kakoi. So the Rabbanon are being memayit many more items than Rebbe. What's going on here? What's the crux of the argument? My time, the Rebbe Doris, he uses the Rebbe Miet, and this is how he dashes. Upaduya, the Pasuk says, Upaduya ben Chodesh, you can redeem any way you want. Is a Rebbe. Very Be'erkcha kesef chamesha shkolim. You should use 5 shkolim. That's a miyat, money. Tivde. Then it says tivde is chazav riba. Now, very important to know is also see. It says in the pasuk upaduya miben chaydish tivde. Both ribuis are written next to each other. The miyat was written afterwards. Nevertheless, we're going to imagine that the miyat is sandwiched between the 2 ribuis. Ribui, miyat, and ribui. The chazav ribui, miyat, ribui. Riba haka. You can use anything. Give a kohen, redeem your son. My riba komil. So my miyat, but there's a miyat there as well, is coming to remind something which is practically the opposite of what the miyat is. And what's that? A star. Money has value. Karka has value. Avodim have value. You can use them all. What you can't use is something that has no value. It has 0 value. A piece of paper. Sorry? Exactly. That's about it. True. Miyat status. So the only thing that's excluded is status. Comes along the Rabbanan, they say, no, we dash a klali prati, same words, but klali prati. The prat, tip the chazav kol. He's klal prati klal. And what do we know about klal prati klal? Is yemar ke'ena prat. I at the don other ke'ena prat. Ma ha prat mefudish dover metal to gufi mama. The prat is something that we want. That is something that's mobile, that's portable, transferable, and it has value. I've called dover metal to the gufi mama. Has to be transportable and intrinsically or inherently valuable. Yotze kakois, exception is karkosh and metalton. Yotze avodim, shokshel kakois. We know that avodim are kapita kakois because it's the chaltem, so we use it all the time. And yotze stutters, avapisha metalton, they are transportable by enguf and mammon. So what do we see from here? Rebbe clearly holds riba mid riba. So when it comes to Shavuos, he would also hold riba mid riba. The one includes the past. Includes a chalti v'lo chalti. So Rebbe passes like a bishmol, and he passes like a kiv in each case differently. Oh, malay Rabbi Lamem, not so posh. Rebbe Dorish Ribu Miyad Rebbe. I'm going to prove to you that Rebbe actually uses the method of klal pratiklau, like Rabbi Shmuel. Got a problem here. In fact, we'll have a problem. How come by Pidyon Ben he uses the method of Ribu Miyad Rebbe? Rebbe generally holds klal pratiklau. What's the story? But Rebbe Kloli Pratidosh we learned Matseya when an Evid wants to stay on beyond the 6 years. So you bring him to the doorpost and you pierce his ear with a Matseya. Ain't little Matseya using a needle Menayel Rabbis. How do you know that you can use Hasoil? How can you use a very sharpened edge piece of wood? And or a machar a cedar, or a thorn, or a machar a needle, or a magdeh like a little hammer, or a michtav of a quill. The lokach, it says in the pasuk, the lokachta you should take, which is a klal or a ribui. Kol dover shenikol biyad. You take whatever you want. So in other words, divrei Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says you take whatever you want. Says, well, you take whatever you want. However, comes along Rebbe, he says, no, I hold that it's very limited. It has to be metal. Rebbe, I'd say, it has to be, no, Rebbe saying, I'm going to learn a klal of pratik klal here, because that's l'kachta, as we'll soon see, you take whatever you want. That's a klal. And then it says here, but only place whatever you want in the air. So therefore, it's a klal prat uklal. And what's the rule by klal prat uklal? Ke'ena prat. It has to be metal, not like Rabbi Yosef says everything. No. And what do you memorize according to Rabbi Yosef? You're the only poison. If you use some kind of a potion to make a piss, that's no good. But anything else is good enough. So we see clearly that behold klal prat uklal. I've got to therefore it's only main prat has to be metal. And therefore in everything except that poison, that potion. Says the Gemara, you're right. In Ba'alma Klolio Prati Dorish. You're right. Rebbe does use klal prati klal. If Rebbe uses klal prati klal, how come when it comes to Pidyon Ben, he says ribui miyat ribui? Interesting. Because we have a problem here. You have both klolim next to each other. So we imagine that the prat, which is written because it says it should be paid, and then it says tifted before it tells you, the chameshes column. So both klolim are both even next to each other. So what we have to then do is take the prat that's written afterwards and move it forward. Then says Rebbe, even though normally I hold you use the method of cloud part of cloud, but when you're moving it forward, I'm going to use the method of ribu yimid ribu. That's why by Pidyon Ben he does that, which does not help us when it comes to Shavuot. By Shavuot, it's a cloud part of cloud. Exactly. In fact, Tracy remains the Tzorachin. So how come Rabbi Shmuel says there's a 14th one that sometimes he'll be made you use ribu yimid ribu when you take the flat, you bring it forward to sandwich in between the two columns. The Ritva gives an answer, and I can't remember what the answer is. I'll say tomorrow, Mister. So he says here, so in Baalma, Klali Pratidashi, timer, you know why the heck you told Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel learned. The Rabbi Shmuel learned, it says, when it comes to fish in the Pasuk, it says, Bamayim. It says twice in the Pasuk, Bamayim. It says the Pasuk, this is what you can eat, Bamayim in the water. There's people learning. If you want to talk, please keep quiet. Okay, this is what you should eat. This is what you should eat. It says Asher Bamayim, and then it says anything that has fins and scales. Again, it says Bamayim in the water. It's twice Bamayim. Bamayim, Shnei Pamim, twice. Ain't the Klal Prat. It's not a Klal Prat. It says the problem is right after Bamayim, it says Banacholim, and it adds Bayamim, it adds more places. First it says Bamayim, which is like the ocean, and then suddenly it also adds a creek, it adds little rivers and all those other kinds of things. So so it says Bishmo. Ain't that Klal Prat? This is not called a Klal Prat. And we learn things from there, about a boy, what happened. It's not a Klal Prat. No boss. Why? Rabbi Shmuel is the one who says Klal Prat Klal. Because over here you're going to have to take the detail, the specifics of Cholim, or Bayamim and Cholim, and move them forward. And when you move them forward, he says that we count as a ribu yimid. Okay. Says the Gemara, yeah. El ribu yimid. So therefore, they say so Rebbe. Therefore, Taka holds Klal Prat Klal. By Pidyon Ben, it's ribu yimid ribu because of that reason. Bring it forward. And Rabbanan disagree. They say just bring it forward and continue using the rule of the methodology of Klal Prat Klal, not the ribu yimid ribu. So you want to ask the question, okay, so now you just refuted yourself. You said that there'd be Paskas like Rabbi Akiva because he believes in the principle of ribu yimid ribu, and therefore when it comes to Shavuos, it's not just future tense, it's not just where you don't so, but also past tense because they use a method ribu yimid ribu. You just said right now that Rebbe hold you use Klal Prat Klal. It's only an exception when you use ribu yimid ribu, only when the miyat is written after both ribuyim. Rebbe Klali Pratidadish, Baal Kocha, Kasha Shavuos, got a problem with Shavuos. Why Taka does Rebbe bring in the Mishnah? Like what do you call it? Like Rabbi Akiva, that we talk about past tense as well. When Rebbe believes that if you hold Klal Prat Klal, it should be only future tense. Remember, Klal Prat Klal only comes to add similar to the Prat. It means still future. The first, not only with self-denial, but also I'm going to throw a rock. I won't throw a rock, which is doesn't know personal harm in any way. Moshe is right. When it comes to Tumah, he passed it like Rabbi Shmuel, like we proved before. When it comes to Shua, he decided to bring Rabbi Akiva, but he pushes a hold of it. Let's go a few more lines. Gufa.
Understand that?
Going back to what we originally said, he wants to. No, why? Because he wants to give you examples of two which become four. And with Rabbi Shmuel, he took a Pascha Bishmuel. Two by Tumah became four. Two with the Torah said Mefedish, and another two he added on. You forgot that this is a race of English. But when it comes to Shavuot, he couldn't. His psak wouldn't work because he holds only future. So the 2 by 4 is later on. We'll discuss what the Shem talk about why doesn't the Gemara learn that the extra 2 is Ezek v'Ezek. Why do you have to say the extra 2 is past tense? Say 2 mefurish in the Torah, right? Lahara lehativ, and the 2 extra that we're going to add on and say you also bring a kram leviyated is Ezek v'Ezek. How do you know that we're talking about past tense? Yeah. Anyway.
How do we conclude about the case that he does do ribu?
So we said the only case that we know is Pidyon Haben, and there because both ribos are next to each other. The pasuk says here upaduya mebechayish tifta, and then it says chamesh shkolim. So the prat had to be moved forward, and then he holds like Tana Bishmo that even though normally we learn cloud part of the cloud. But when you move the prat forward, it changes it around. Otherwise, why would the Torah have changed the structure to teach you? That's not the same method. Okay, just a few more lines. Gufa, the Gemara repeats what we just learned. Menayin, how do you know? How do you know you don't bring a carbon over here only if you knew before you forgot? How do you know you had to know before? The Helamatite, it says twice. We had this before. It says twice vanilla. The first vanilla tell you to limit it only the person was tummy and he forgot. And the second vanilla, yada. We take the repetitive, so we take the word yada, we put it before the word vanilla to teach you that you had to know before you forgot. And Rebbe says, no, I don't need a pasuk for that. The very word vanilla means you forgot. What does forgot mean? That you once knew. Knew. So what do we need yada for? What do you need? And he knew. And it's obviously not talking about he knew afterwards, because otherwise you wouldn't be talking about a carbon. How can you bring a carbon if you didn't know afterwards you did anything wrong? So what does it come to teach you? To expand. Not only if you were tummy and you forgot, but even if you were tummy, you didn't forget. But you forgot that this is the base Hamikdash cycle. You forgot that this is a carbon. You also bring a carbon alleviated. That's what we just learned the Bryce. Well, just a few lines. The Nella Meklaus Yoda, how know Vanilla means he wants to know. Maybe that means he never knew. Maybe Vanilla means it was hidden from him. He never knew. How do you know the Vanillum? That's what Rebbe's long is. I don't need a pasuk. It's obvious. Vanillum, he forgot. Omar Rabba, forgot isn't. You wouldn't use the word vanilla. What would you use? If you want to say that he never knew, you would say it's hidden from him. The alumamenu. The fact that it says vanilla means it's like it happened right now. He now forgot. Says the Gemara, according to this, got to be saita. When it comes to a saita, the Chsiv, it says v'nelem me'ene isha. It says that he wasn't aware about his wife. You're telling me the way we know Lim Parshas is he never knew that his wife might have had an affair with somebody, right? And he gives a kinu, he gives a warning and a stid, and then she went and discreetly with him. There's that person, but you're telling me when it's a vanilla means he knew. Now, what do you mean he knew? He knew his wife was having an affair. Perhaps he knew and he still lived with her. Otherwise, knowing it doesn't mean anything. So he knew and he still lived with her, and it's a problem because it says that if he lived with his wife after he suspected her, then the water will not do its miracle and prove her innocence or guilt. That the water work. What Tanya we learned, it says in the pasuk that if he goes through the water, it says the person shouldn't think he did anything wrong. And the isha he teaches that one. And only that woman carries the sin. If she dies as a result, he didn't do anything wrong. She's the one who misbehaved, not you. Now, so we learn now when nika isha what sin? Bisman she ishma nukim oven. If a person has no sin with his wife, in other words, he did not know even with her, just with her. Was never over on yeah, true, but also with her, and ain't that mine because the water will not do. Look at Ashi. But he did not have any relation with her after he gave her the warning and after the stira. But if ain't each look ain't my bike is so according to you, vanilla means he once knew, and knowing means nothing over here. So here, knowing means much more than just knowing. It means that he had relations with her. Then why taka would it be operative? Vanilla over here means he never knew. By Torah, it says that Iya writes, you know the value of Torah. Who knows the value of Torah? It says it is hidden from any human or any creature. This is completely hidden from any living thing. Well, your taich of vanilla means we once knew we forgot. Well, we once knew the erich of Torah, and then when we forgot, what happened? Mikal he could have a yodabay. There were those who knew it. Well, that we once upon a time knew it. Well, see, it says lo yoda enish erka. Nobody knows the true value of Torah. Elo Abaye says, we turn everything around. Kasavar Rebbe holds that Yedias base Rabbi Shama Yediyah. If you learned in your yeshiva when you were growing up that tumah is a problem, tumah is a problem, and you touched something, you know that you touched it, you just had no idea it was tumah. That's called yoda. You know that if this was tumah, you have a problem. That's enough. That's enough of the idea, right? You just didn't think that this thing itself was tumah, but you know that the laws of tumah, and you know that if you touch tumah, you shouldn't want to make some English. That's what yediyah in the chilul means. Changes it all around. Yediyah doesn't mean he knew he became tumah and then he forgot. So therefore, everyone has of an element that is, you had what you call base rabba yudiyah. So the Gemara, Omer Papa Labaya Electronic, it says, Ain ba yediyah b'tchila v'yesh ba yediyah b'soy. Remember we said, if you had no knowledge in the beginning, but you had knowledge, you never knew in the beginning, right? But you only knew the end. So then we said that the Seir of Yom Kippur, that Musaf, they bring on Yom Kippur on the outside, that's going to be Mechaper. And if you did not know, so you don't bring a Korban over Yeda, but now that you were Tameh, you now retrospectively you were Tameh when you walked in the base of Mikdash. So how do you Mechaper yourself? There's no Korban over Yeda. So we say the Korban of Yom Kippur is Mechaper. But you're saying it's impossible ever not to have a Yediyah because everybody who went to Yeshiva has a Yediyah. The less Yediyah base Rabbi, anybody who went to Yeshiva doesn't learn Yiddish word. Huh. Imagine Gemara couldn't imagine that a guy went through a yeshiva system and doesn't know the idea. Yes. There's a heichit timtzah. So that whole din, that if you had no yediyah in the beginning, but yediyah in the end, Yom Kippur is mechaper. We're talking about this seldom case where a person is what do you call it? Is a finish in Ishba. So remember, I told you yesterday that the Pirush of Shai Rabban, when he explains, he says finish in Ishba, and I said to you, why is it I'm saying? Because this Gemara right here, it's only limited to a case of a kid in Ishba. Otherwise, everyone has yediyah. You know the idea that and since you knew what you were doing, we're not talking about a masasik. You had your hands moving around, you touch something, you didn't realize you touched it. That's not what we're talking about here. Showing me you knew exactly what you're doing. You just didn't know it was an aveda. You didn't know that this was coming. See you tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day.